I'm so glad to talk with you.
Thank you for having me, Adriana.
Well, why
How
don't we jump
exciting.
right in and you can introduce yourself and tell us what was your journey into becoming an author?
Yes, thank you. Oh, my name is Naja Lund Aparico. I come from Greenland and I'm a Greenlandic Inuk author. I live in the Pacific Northwest with my family now. My journey towards becoming an author, the publishing industry, began when my two older sons, they were young, which was like the beginning of the 2000s. And I realized that there wasn't that many picture books or children's books that I saw in English language. There were a lot of fun ones that were like lighthearted, that were silly and funny. Instead, I kept them, and which were amazing and served a purpose, but I only found like older stories about Greenland and our culture. So I wanted to fill that void that where I brought in funny, like just gentle and children's books with children's voices. So I really wanted to fill a void there that I saw.
And let's talk about that because I'm glad you mentioned about the playful aspect of it. I want to talk about that later, but first, maybe can you introduce us to your new book? And later we'll talk about that. You have actually written other children's books, but this is the first one published here in the US, and that's Seasons by the Lake Adventures in Greenland. So tell us all about this book and the inspiration behind it.
Oh, absolutely. It's about the brothers Minik and Nuka who are going outdoors, playing outdoors through the seasons in Greenland. And I thought that it would be a funny way to show how children in Greenland play outdoors. Because I'm sure if you talk about Greenland, you think it's all ice and all winter and all darkness. And
Yes.
maybe that we never play outside because it's cold. But I wanted to dispel that myth, and we actually play outdoors most of the time. Contrary, that we spend a lot of time outside, and they're basic playtimes. So I wanted to share what kind of world we create with those plays.
And as you said, the book is inspired by your own childhood in Greenland and talks about the passing seasons. And one of the things I loved about it is in your text, you really get the sense that everything happens as it should, just when it should. One refrain that you repeat several times is one day and not a day too soon. Yeah, and talking about when each new season comes. So, what do you want children to take away from the book?
I think mainly that first of all, to get that feeling or sense that people live in Greenland, and but also that the way we live in Greenland is very dependent on nature. That our lives are dictated by nature in many ways because our or in everyday still a lot of people still live some of their lives following traditional ways of life by living off the seas, what the seas can give. And then I wanted that to get through and to show. I think the main message is that the nature is really what is our boss.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And I think a lot of us who are living lives kind of disconnected from nature, we don't really have that sense of kind of the rhythms of the year and letting that guide us, which is such a neat lesson for children to learn, especially as I was reading and I thought a lot about how kids spend a lot of time on screens versus outside, which I know is something you really emphasize about trying to get them outdoors and show all the things that kids can be doing outside. Um, and part of that is, as you said, kind of an Inuit sensibility and way of life. How do you think that your book teaches kids about that worldview, more of an indigenous worldview about the relationship between humans and nature, and the importance of having kids be out in nature exploring?
I think the way it shows, just like you point out in the language, in the refrain that I'm saying, another day too soon, it's not up to us.
Mm.
We are just here to follow and adjust to what nature was giving us. And then, it was a survival mechanism for thousands of years because that's how we would get our food, that's how we would be safe, and very small changes in this in the nature could be devastating.
Mm.
So I think, and that still, is a part of our soul. It's still a part of our knowledge. And even today, the wild outdoors is just outside our house pretty much. It's not that far. We're very connected to nature. And that's the way I wanted to show that regardless of the seasons. And I think you showed one of my favorite spreads with the summer and the fish and the lake. That's kind of, that shows even just outside there's adventure. Even just outside your door you will find something cool.
This one, I don't know, this one or maybe this
that
one.
one that one with the
Yes,
fishing.
so beautiful. And something I thought was really interesting is that it does talk about mythology. I mean, here we talk about the Northern Lights and kind of beliefs about what those are. But you went about it in a really different way than I've seen because a lot of books about mythology, a lot of times they're nonfiction books and they're pretty serious. And this one, like you said, it's through the eyes of children and it's very playful and it's very fun because even as they're talking about it, like the brothers are kind of joking with each other and maybe trying to scare each other a little bit because they're talking about like, oh, watch out, if you hear the whistling sound, they're going to come get you. And so one of them is trying to fool the other one. So why did you decide to present it in this way as opposed to just more of a kind of factual presentation?
I think children understands and listens better and maybe learn better when they learn from their peers, when they hear it from other children and see and feel. I think the main thing that I wanted to show with Seasons by the Lake is how does it feel? How does it feel to be out in nature and not just telling them, oh, the Northern Lights scared us. That's not going to give them. I wanted to get that sense of suspense, tension that comes along with it. So giving them the children's voices, the storytelling voice, it was very important.
And how did you come up with the relationship between the brothers? Because that's one of the best parts of the book is this really sweet relationship between them.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I think I started with it was just one child. It was just Monique, and then eventually, I'm not sure. This story has gone through many iterations, and then eventually it became two, just to have that playfulness, just to have that back and forth conversation, and then I think that really helped. It was something that came through writing the story.
That's beautiful. But what's interesting, as I mentioned before, is this is not your first children's books. That you've previously published, I believe, two children's
That's right.
books in Greenland, written in Greenlandic. And so, something I love to ask people who are bilingual, when you write in Greenlandic versus English, is your storytelling different, or is it changing because of who your audience is?
Perhaps, I mean, I'm sure it does, but intentionally, not like strategically, not from my side. But I think
Mm,
like what I notice for me when I write in English, it's faster. In
mm,
Greenlandic, it's a much bigger, I would say, like arduous job getting the right grammar.
mm,
And I mean, as an example, one sentence in English maybe has 5 words could be one sentence in Greenlandic. So
mm,
you really have to be like grammatically correct, and it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot
mm,
of time. So I think to me, I mean, one way it's making my writing faster.
mm.
But at the same time, I'm sure there's some like soul that maybe is a little bit lost in translation,
Uh,
as there would be, it was with any translation.
were the books also translated into Danish, I guess?
My Greenlandic books, both this one, was translated to some Nordic languages. It's a middle grade novel, and then it's called Recess, and then the other one is a duolingual, so
Mm,
Danish and Greenlandic language. It's hard to see,
mm.
and
Do you-
that's called My Friend Sophus.
have they been, or have you considered translating them into English?
I think those came out in 2007. I think in 2009. And I love this one, this little middle grade novel won a little award for in the Greenlandic language. It was like a West Nordic competition.
Mm.
That maybe would be right one to translate. The other one, I think my writing style has developed a lot more
Mm.
since then, as it's been a long time. I feel like that was my first try at writing a picture book, and I
Right.
wish I knew so many things, that I know now. I love this story, but and
Mm.
beautiful illustrations by a Greenlandic artist who
Mm.
was well known. She passed along, but she's amazing.
Mm.
So
Are
for
there
the art,
are there many children's books in Greenlandic?
there are now. There's a lot more now than there was back even in the 2000s.
Mm.
Um, there are a lot more now, and I feel like they're aware, much more awareness that when you write for children, it should be a lot more like children appropriate. Because I
Mm.
think what we have done in Greenland is throughout my childhood, a lot of the stories were maybe for older audiences, but we were storytelling, the oral storytelling, country and nation. So they weren't always like adjust. It was like folk stories or
Right.
folk tales, that are maybe not the best for like picture book age
Right.
group. A little scary and a little, yeah. So I feel like there's a lot more awareness of that now, and
Mhm.
the scene is changing for sure.
So when you decided to write this one in English, but you've incorporated a lot of Greenlandic words into the story, how did you go about deciding how to do it for a way that for an audience that mostly didn't speak Greenlandic, like how to incorporate it in and still where people can pick it up from the context? Was that difficult to do that?
I think, the way I did it, initially, I don't even think I had any Greenlandic language, but I followed um, other non-English English writers, but there are other cultures, and the way they weaved in their languages, I really admired, and I did that. And I think maybe my editor was the one that suggested we just not have a translation, but just keep it in the context.
Mhm.
I'm
And
pretty sure my editor did that. Yeah.
well, I have to say, one of the things that I love about it too is at the back. This isn't a glossary, but it's just kind of the back matter. But you do have in here incorporated in here where it describes the words. And as somebody who I love languages, I love that you didn't just give a translation. You really kind of talked about the meaning of the words and what it kind of tells about the culture. Which anybody who else who loves that, there's really great back matter here. And I wanted to talk in general. There was an interview you did recently on baby bookworm. Um, and you said, you just phrased it so beautifully. You said, children's books are the real gateway to world peace. So, can you talk a little bit more about that? And how can books like yours, which do talk about, another language, another place and culture, how can they be a gateway to world peace?
Well, my background is in international relations, and when I worked in diplomacy, what was stated, like what was really necessary was that we always have to come from the same kind of framework before we could have dialogue, before we could start any negotiations or just any talks. You have to speak from the same language. And I'm not saying like Greenlandic or English, I'm saying from the same point of view,
Mm.
worldview, that we have to kind of create some values that are similar. And then from there, we can discuss whatever conflict, whatever issues or negotiations we're going through. So with picture books, I feel like they're the ones that are creating this basic human framework where, little kids find a way to empathize with someone from Greenland or for someone from, Japan, or, you start to understand that we play the same way.
Mm.
We have fun with our families the same way. Our brothers are the same. It's just a universal language. Is that what I would call it?
Oh, I love that. And um, I also want to talk about the MFA you're working on. I know at the Institute of American Indian Arts, and just kind of the importance of especially Indigenous representation or having Indigenous creators of children's books. As I mentioned, the illustrator for Seasons by the Lake is Choctaw German, and you mentioned working with a Greenlandic artist on a previous book. Why is that kind of representation so important? Not just representation in the book itself, but the fact that the creators are from those cultures.
Well, I mean, that's such an important question, especially for Indigenous authors. It's a big responsibility.
Mhm.
Um, I think we're entering a whole new, what you say, it's a new time where Indigenous authors get to have a lot more say and gets to form our literary stories, our background and culture. And it's a wonderful thing. But the statistics shows that only less than 3%, this is, I would assume, the US market, uh, picture books or children's books are written by Indigenous authors and about Indigenous uh, lives or children. So I think there's still a lot more to do for Indigenous peoples to be represented in literature, in children's literature. And it's important because research shows that children who don't see themselves in the mainstream media, they do not feel they belong. They're just on the outskirts, and it's obviously very important for their well-being to know that they belong. And then picture books is a way to show it, or children's books in general.
Right, and also, as you mentioned, I think the kind of worldview that it introduces to children is something that is so needed in the world today about the relationship with nature, getting outdoors. You know, that kind of way of seeing the world is something I think all children really benefit from.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of value for the reader, regardless. Like other cultures can teach you so much.
Mhm.
So, anyways, it's not just, it's not just for the Indigenous peoples and their children that will benefit. It's everyone,
Yeah.
all the readers.
Absolutely. And so what I know that I don't know if it's too soon to ask this because Seasons by the Lake just came out, but do you have other projects that you're working on or thinking about?
Oh, I have two more picture books coming out the next few years, and I'm really excited about them.
Are you able to
Yeah.
tell us anything or is it too soon to?
I think I can say that one is next year, and then that comes out next year in 1 year, about 1 year. And then the other one should be coming out the year after.
Do you ever think that you might go back to middle grade or are you just really enjoying picture books right now?
Well, I write nonfiction essays, personal essays as well, a part of my MFA program. So I'm trying to finish a collection of, these are for adults, personal essays, which hopefully there'll be a draft by the end of May. I don't know. It's a lot of work. So that's my main project right now.
Amazing. Well, when your new books come out, we'll be sure to share about them in our stories. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk. I know we were talking earlier and you have a very busy schedule, so I appreciate that you taking the time to talk with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Liana.
And like I said, if you haven't entered our giveaway yet, be sure to do that. It ends tonight at midnight.
Oops.
If you joined us late, you can find this interview, the whole interview up on Instagram, and I'll have it on YouTube soon as well. So thank you, Naya. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that.
And thanks to all of you for watching, and we'll be back next week with another interview. Bye, everybody.